How are you, sir? Should be fine. Now let me start with this topic, that is Vidyarthi and D.N. Majumdar. I'll give you a frame of that. Let me give you a structure for any such comparison. So here, of course, both of them being Indians, it is less on that front, but otherwise if a comparison comes up, comparison of the significance of Indian anthropologists versus foreign anthropologists, if that is the kind of a question, say comparison of Majumdar and D.N. Majumdar or L.P. Vidyarthi, the kind of things that come, whether you like it or not, you give more importance to them, at least to show a respect. Later you can slowly rip them apart. And after having said this, it's better you go with the basic school of thought, whether they were functionalists, evolutionists, etc., etc. Basic schools of thought, research methodology, and then concepts and approaches, and somewhere in between, somewhere where maybe here, you can also talk about branches they worked in, branches of anthropology they worked in. And then a role played in application or in government. Those are the things. Can I start talking so that you would keep writing? So it's more or less like a full-fledged question that I am doing. It should take about not less than 15 minutes or so. I was listening to somebody yesterday. So my idea was to see how people from one religion converted to the other religion, how the remnants of the past continue. Interestingly, when I was looking at these faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and several other monotheistic religions, from Hinduism, when somebody had moved on to monotheistic religions, I found that most of them that have become priests in the new faith were definitely the priests in their own faith. I was looking at this, several Shastris and Sharmas trying to preach the new religious books, and there's so much of an acumen there. I thought I would bring some of those things maybe tomorrow. Aaj to hai nahi, zyada log. So tomorrow I will show you some clippings of how somebody who had migrated from a caste Iyer Hindu to somebody like a Protestant Christian, how the same kind of chantings. So new chantings with the old style, new prayer with the old style. This was very magical actually. that I will be sharing with you tomorrow. Let's start with that. So it's something like this. As most of us know, there were 4 or 5 very significant people in Indian anthropology whom we said that without them the discipline would not have got established. So you can perhaps say that out of, other than people like S.C. Dubey or M.N. Srinivas, these are the 2 people who must have laid the foundations of Indian anthropology, who had given a respectful position to Indian anthropology. And they were the people who were trying to establish precedents that the Indian have superior understanding of their own culture. That's where we said that there is a new way of defining anthropology, that is study of one's own self. This was established by them. In spite of the fact that they were responsible for the discipline, these were the ones who have added a credible understanding of Indian society. Now coming to the focus area, maybe I would first talk about the focus area, then take you to the branches. As most of us already know, Vidyarthi generally dealt with tribal issues. Most of the time, his idea was tribal issues. On the other hand, Majumdar was doing tribal plus caste. Right from the beginning, we see in him an effort to study culture contact. When he says he is putting up that effort to study culture contact, change in the tribals, this is what was his school of inquiry. When he says change in tribals, there was one book, if at all you could recall, A Tribe in Transition. That was the book, A Tribe in Transition, where he was trying to write the first exposure of tribals to the mainstream society. And sir, when he says culture contact, it is not simply the caste that he is looking at. Culture contact due to first flow of industrialization. First flow of industrialization. Parallelly, I am doing here. Vidyarthi's tribal issues were more concerned with, one, governance of tribals. Second was he was giving ethnographic accounts of tribals. He was giving ethnographic accounts of tribals. See, in a way, Vidyarthi was providing us with the complete encyclopedia of tribes. And there is one commonality. The commonality is both of them were trying to see how modernization of tribe is happening. How modernization of tribe is happening. So if at all one looks at what are the aspects of culture change they must have considered, Majumdar's scope of things looked to be limited when compared to Vidyarthi's. Majumdar was mostly talking about industrialization and related areas, whereas Vidyarthi was trying to give us a long list of factors that were responsible for culture change. So it could be like he has chapters in tribal cultures in India, Hinduization, its impact, Islamization, Christianization and other isms there. This was one. So religious impact was one. He was also talking about industrialization, and he also incorporated terms such as secularization and modernization. So in a way, it looks to be a very very broad-based, very wide when compared to D.N. Majumdar. Sir, I want you to mention in this part, meaning when you are in a transition from writing about the focus area of each of them, two branches when you are going, you make a mention that Majumdar was somebody, can I remove this one? Majumdar was somebody who was trying to present himself as, say, Bowers, Franz Bowers of Indian anthropology. Meaning that Majumdar was trying to work in almost all the branches of anthropology. At that time, a big divide that was existing in the discipline was physical anthropology and socio-cultural anthropology. Archaeology was not really in the prominence. Linguistics was given a smaller importance. And this was also a time these people were considered to be largely superior. So he was trying to do researches in both of them. On the other hand, if you look at Vidyarthi, his focus area was mostly socio-cultural anthropology, and as a part of socio-cultural anthropology, he was working on linguistics. So their full-fledged contribution, both of them have a commonality. The commonality is their fullest contribution to archaeological anthropology hardly existed. Their fullest contribution to archaeological anthropology hardly existed. But this man was focusing at socio-cultural, here both of them was there. And you also make a mention here that Majumdar was responsible for this. You have written in his contributions, he was responsible for introducing several new things, several newer concepts, newer ideas. Most of those things were being done for the first time in Indian anthropology. And we also said at that time, because he was doing several things for the first time, there was a lack of sophistication, if you could recall. Are you able to recall what we have done in those classes? So I started by talking about superiority of Indian anthropologists, the new definition that they tried to give to anthropology, that it is a study of the self, our own cultures. And then we said that these two people had two different areas of focus. One was having tribal centeredness, the other was having tribe plus others, that is the caste groups, etc. And then when they are dealing with the tribe, there is a difference in the way they are dealing with the tribes. One was trying to do more of ethnographic work and then elaborate list of tribes he was studying with Vidyarthi, and was trying to give the impact of various things. Social change was comprehensively addressed by him, whereas Majumdar was there with a few areas being examined, like you have industrialization, urbanization, etc. These were his focus areas. Nevertheless, this was a man who tried to work in several branches of anthropology that were prominently existing in India at that time, and he was trying to do research on many new things because he was doing them for the first time in the country, because there was nobody who had tried a hand at them. He was not having some kind of rule book, some kind of a guiding document so that he can move on in this direction. That's the reason why he was having several hiccups or lack of sophistication there. Let us coming to this man. There is one other orientation. Now, with regard to basic schools of thought, he writes by himself that he is a functionalist. This is very important. When I announce that I am the hero, that matters. When others say you are a hero, it doesn't matter much. When somebody is claiming that I am a hero. And he writes that he was influenced by Malinowski. So when we look at his definitions also, several of the definitions you should recall that he was good at defining things. This is where we see our image of Tyler. Tyler's way of introducing vocabulary was there with him, where he was trying to define, and the definitions show the functional orientedness. But then impact of somebody like Malinowski was there on both of them, especially when they did the field work. Interestingly, both of them were non-participant field workers. Non-participant field workers. You understand the difference, right? That's not a participant one. He was definitely staying among them. He was definitely staying among participant in the sense that you should take an active part in the activities that go on in that community, like how Malinowski was trying to go by the Kula, etc. They were not doing that. Both of them were non-participant, but then this man had extensive field studies, extensive travel. The entire Indian subcontinent, we see the examples he's quoting, but there is something much more interesting here. He introduced a method called revisit method in fieldwork traditions. A revisit method in fieldwork traditions. Revisit, you remember, right? Khasa. The 22 summers thing, revisit. There is one other commonality in them. This is one. And there is one other thing that you should remember. Whenever we are reading about Vidyarthi, whenever we are writing about Vidyarthi, especially things like origin of Indian anthropology or economic elements, etc., etc., when we do all that, he was giving us chronologies. So chronological orientation is there in both of them, meaning writing historically, writing evolutionarily was there with both of them. When I am saying that writing historically, writing evolutionarily, this is not the same as classical evolutionists. That you will have to bear in mind. Both of them were writing historical stages, chronologies, and evolutionary ways, meaning how change is occurring one stage after the other. No. They were not followers of historical, if at all it was historical particularism, you would not go in for theorizing. You are busy giving facts. It is not that way. Both of them were giving theories also, meaning if at all not grand theories, they were giving concepts also. If at all the thinker is not concluding after reporting the facts, you can say that he is a historical particularist. But in both of them, in the case of both of them, either they are starting with a hypothesis and trying to prove it, or they were doing some kind of a field study and trying to give a concept. He has a Beauvoisian way where he is trying to work in different fields, training different people, but it is not the historical particularism. If at all you want to say that there is some kind of an impact of Beauvois on them, you may say that both of them were not ethnocentric in orientation. Both of them were trying to write the emic perspectives, so that they can understand the tribal problems. It is here I am coming to the next point there. I started talking about basic theoretical approaches. One person says that I am a functionalist, but we see that he has an image of Beauvois. He has also an image of Taylor where he is trying to define, give vocabulary. Both of them were field workers, non-participant field workers. There is a credit here, that is a revisit method. It is here that he is extensively working on several tribes. And he is one of the rarest fellows in the discipline or in the administration who must have physically visited the largest number of tribes by any person. That credit goes to him. The other day somebody was saying that he had started reading Vidyarthi, but what he found was that after 2 pages he found so many names occurring. That's what I told you in the beginning also. When you want to read LP Vidyarthi, be prepared for the huge number of tribes. You need not have to study the entire chapter. Study 2 pages. You will know several names that you haven't heard of so far. And both of them were having historical orientation, either in terms of writing evolutionary stages, etc., etc. And then both of them have a commonality of emic ideology. And then I'm continuing with that tribal thing. Both of them were part in governmental policy making. Both of them were parties in governmental policy making. One was actually called an applied anthropologist. He was also called somebody who produced problem-oriented ethnographs. Problem-oriented ethnographs. This man, we have heard of him as action anthropologist and applied anthropologist. I repeat what I have written here. I said that D.N. Majumdar is an applied anthropologist, so there's something like a concepts either given by yourself or somebody else has given. You are applying the concepts to the field, trying to understand what's happening in the field. And we have written that he was the first man to write a problem-oriented ethnograph. What was that? Ho. The first problem-oriented ethnograph produced by an Indian anthropologist also. And we said at that time, this was a tribe that was witnessing culture change because of industrialization. So he was trying to write an ethnograph which is called problem-oriented because he was trying to examine why the problem has occurred. He was trying to examine why the problem has occurred, but solutions were not in his bracket. Solutions were not in his bracket. Whereas here, he was an action anthropologist because he is applying the anthropological concepts either given by himself or by the others to the situation and was trying to suggest solutions. He was trying to suggest solution. We have seen NMS complex, resettlement rehabilitation policy, several areas where displacement kind of things are occurring, guidelines he was trying to give. He was trying to explain why somebody is opposing some kind of a governmental policy. So it is here that we see him more engrossed in giving suggestions. Somebody also have written this, that in D.N. Majumdar we see something like interdisciplinary nature. We see something like an interdisciplinary nature where he was trying to work along with several other disciplines, several other academic or practical disciplines. You remember I was trying to show you one document which was written jointly by 3 people, 2 of them including D.N. Majumdar and Mahalanobis. This was a person who was action anthropologist. He was an applied anthropologist. Let us go a little further from there. So both of them were involved in the governmental policy making in important positions, working interdisciplinarily. In the case of D.N. Majumdar, we see more engrossedness within himself in LP Vidyarthi. Coming to concepts and approaches, you can have a good list of them. For instance, can you recall the definitions, the concepts given by D.N. Majumdar or the people he must have dealt with? Race was there and it tukke mein laga and kuch to boliye. I'm talking about any concepts he dealt with. He proposed something. अच्छा इनके बताओ. Super. ఇంకా ఓకే, దాన్ని మర్చిపోవు కదా. అండ్ వాట్ ఎల్స్? I didn't hear you. And definition. Sacred complex. And Acha, when we were talking about this somewhere, did we speak of anything that he must have given? And I made a mention there. This was the concept actually given by D.N. Majumdar, modified as an MS complex by Vidyarthi. Kya tha? Man, area, resources and cooperation. This is one way of saying the various concepts and approaches. So you would be comparing them, which is the utility of each of them. And then you give a decent exit, your heartfelt